What is going on, guys? It's the Mad Dragon. We're back doing another preview video for the World Cup warm-ups. This one for England versus Wales, the rematch that we get to have from last week in the reverse fixture. I've already done the one for France versus Scotland. I'm going to hope my audio is slightly better in this one. My microphone playing up today being a little bit annoying, so hopefully it's all good. We're going to have a look at the official teams that have been named for both sides to play in this game, who's some good picks, some bad picks, some thoughts about how these teams might be playing, and finally, of course, giving a score prediction. If you enjoy this video, make sure to drop it a like, and if you want to keep up to date with all the rugby news, make sure to subscribe to the channel, help support the smaller rugby channels on YouTube. I am joined once again by the Crocodile. You guys have been dropping down some names for the Crocodile that now seems to be becoming a thing on it. Checking out my analytics. I know most of you guys that are watching now tend to be male and over the age of 30, so most of you guys are actually older than me that typically watch my types of videos, which is great. I just love the fact that we've got a community of people that are grown men and we all really enjoy trying to think of some funny pun names for a giant stuffed crocodile. I think that's wonderful. So the three lead contenders at the minute, seeing as we're talking about England, we've got Joe Croc and a singer, which I thought was really good. Richie McCrock, as opposed to Richie McCaw from New Zealand, and one that was a bit more of a stab out there, I think, Alligator Price from Scotland. So if you've got any other fun crocodile-based pun names you fancy giving it, drop it down in the comments, because it really does bring a smile to my face reading about it. So Wales versus England last week. Wales taking that one 20 points to 9. If you missed the game, you might have been, thinking, oh my god, it looks like Wales dominated that game. They crushed it out. It might be even similar to, that game we had back in 2012, 2013 that was like 30 points to 3 in the Principality. Sounds like they absolutely trounced it. No, it was more a fact that both teams didn't really perform as well as they could have, and England really ruined so many of their own chances. The handling issues from England last week was just appalling to watch. They got to 16 handling errors by the end of that game, which is just unacceptable for any level of, tier 1 rugby or club level rugby almost. And they really let down their own attack. The line-out system wasn't working from them. All their attack, they had the more territory, the more possession, going on the more attack and ruining it themselves. The Wales defensive line holding up strong. The scramble defence from Wales was actually really good in that first half. But the actual game itself, relatively boring, I think fair to say for the first half. You have to be someone who really enjoys rugby to have taken a lot from watching teams just box kick it to each other and score penalties. But it was that second half, Wales bringing on the subs, making an impact, changing the game style and getting across for some lovely tries, whereas England subs came on, didn't really improve it at all, just kind of came on and replaced the players that were on, and they still face the same amount of issues. Going into this week then, we see the reverse fixture, England versus Wales at Twickenham. Now, as expected, England have, of course, shaken up their team a whole bunch from the team we got to see last week. England, in between these two games, have also announced their World Cup squad, so potentially relieving a bit of pressure for these players. They know they're in the squad, they know they're going to the World Cup, sometimes needing to think like, oh, I've got to prove I can play better than everyone else can sometimes maybe damage your game because you're thinking too much about one thing and not focused on the game. So I'm sure from an England coaching standpoint, they'll be looking for far more things to be improved, but you have to say this team that's been announced does look like a stronger England team. You'd be expecting a lot of those issues they faced last week to not really be brought into this game. So starting out in the front row, Joe Marler goes in alongside Jamie George and Will Stewart, the only man to retain in that front row from last week. Ellis Genge moving to the bench this week, so they're probably going to be testing out who they want to be that starting loose head. I've seen some real big discussions from people. Some people really like Ellis Genge as the starting choice. Some people really think he shouldn't even be in the team. There's a real divide in the England community talking about who you want to start out in that front row. I think Ellis Genge is a really good player. I would probably be having him as my number one choice for World Cup time. I think in terms of your front row, it'd probably be Genge, Jamie George and Will Stewart or Kyle Sinclair. It would sort of flip for me. But Joe Marler coming in for this week, a wealth of experience, got a lot of age on him now, but he's got an awful lot of caps behind him. Really strong scrummaging, something that an area they'll really want to improve on, because the scrummaging last week for both sides, to be fair, wasn't really the best. But you have to say the Wales front row, far less capped, far less experience. You'd be expecting a bit more from that England team. In the lock department, Maro Itoje goes back in the 4 shirt alongside George Martin, retaining his number 5 from last week. And in the back row, Corny Laws moves in at blindside flanker, Ben Earl at open side, and Billy Vunipola in that number 8 shirt. So a completely new back row for England. Corny Laws getting back in, which is really nice. He's had his own bouts of injury over the past year or so. So looking forward to seeing him back in the side. Lewis Ludlam, for me, has been very impressive. And looking ahead towards that World Cup, I would seriously be considering having Ludlam start in that blindside flanker. However, Courtney Laws, I think, is also a really utilizable player in terms of the line out. So now you've not just got your two locks, you can chuck Courtney Laws in the air at the line out as well and cause some issues. Again, the line out for England last week, another big area of concern, especially in that second half. Wales were stealing line outs, they were making a nuisance of themselves. So having three jumpers this week, that can absolutely get in the air, I think that's a nice move. Billy Vunipola at 8. There's been a lot of talking points about Alex Dombrandt not named in that England team, considering how little time it feels like we've got to see Billy Vunipola on the international stage recently. So it's going to be a big game for him to try and get back into this England side now as they build towards that World Cup. Billy Vunipola is named. He knows he's in. Time to start putting in some big performances in that number 8 shirt. In the halfback partnership, Jack Van Poortvliet goes in the scrum half position. Owen Farrell is captain at 10. Now, there was a lot of talk after that World Cup squad was announced that Henry Slade not in the side. Only 3 dedicated centres for this England team. I assumed that would be more in line with that. Borthwick was thinking of playing Farrell at 12 and having a dedicated centre outside, and we would play someone else at 10, whether it's Marcus Smith or George Ford. Doesn't look like they're going for it. Maybe this is another sort of test. They've got big games coming up after this one as well. They're playing Ireland away next week, followed by a game against Fiji in Twickenham. So maybe this is a good team just to test how they want to see if they want to put Owen Farrell at 10. Maybe against Ireland, they might put him at 12 to see how they fancy it against some of the bigger games they'll go up against Argentina in their pool. But it does mean that they've opened the door to having 2 dedicated centres of Ollie Lawrence and Joe Marchant. Now, these are 2 lads out of this England team I think are actually performing really well. Joe Marchant was one of the few names I felt like I could talk positively about in that England performance last week. One of the real threats in terms of finding room in the defensive line. Some really nice running lines from him, really cutting through some gaps that didn't look like they were there, causing all sorts of nuisance and causing Wales to go into the scramble. And Ollie Lawrence, for everyone who saw the Six Nations, what an absolute nuisance he is for defence as well. Wales will be very alert to what Ollie Lawrence can bring in this side. So 2 really good centre choices here. I like this decision, and we'll see how this works with Owen Farrell. But I'm looking forward to see this partnership actually work for them. In the back 3, Elliot Daly going in on the left wing, Henry Arundel on the right wing, and Freddie Stewart remaining at 15. Now, Elliot Daly going in at 11. This one is interesting. Of course, he's played wing with England before. I typically tend to think of Elliot Daly at fullback. He's also been used as a centre, from time to time. Winger is one of the areas I really don't think is set in this England team. They've been trying to chop and change their wingers for a good while now. Thockenasinger not in the side, Johnny May not in the side. Henry Arundel, I think, is a very exciting player, and I'm looking forward to seeing more from him, because when he gets his hands on the ball and you give him a bit of room, he's a bit of a nightmare to deal with. Elliot Daly, as opposed to Max Malins as well on that wing. Maybe that could work for them. Elliot Daly, of course, also brings you some long-range kicking. So, if you're treating this like a real full test, which it probably will be, you can imagine penalties can come into this one. So some long-range kicks from the halfway line. Someone like Elliot Daly is absolutely going to be able to have the range. So it's probably a good overall test side team. But yeah, I really don't think anyone is nailed on in terms of the World Cup for these winger positions for England. But overall, you'd have to say this is an improvement team on the England team that we got to see last week. They're looking a lot stronger in a lot of different areas. That centre partnership is something I'm really looking forward to see how they perform in this one. In the replacements then, Theo Dan going in alongside of Ellis Genge and Dan Cole. Now, Theo Dan, poor lad, came on, feels like just at the time the game was beginning to turn against England, and I don't think he had a great debut, didn't get to play that many minutes, has got named in the World Cup squad, so needs all the time on the pitch that he can get, but came on, the lineouts from him didn't look great. Wales got right in amongst the lineouts as soon as he came on. His first 2 carries on the ball, he got clattered in the first one and I think dropped the ball. And then in the second carry, I think he got turned over in a jackal penalty. Not necessarily the greatest debut from the lad, but I'm looking forward to seeing more from him, see what he can offer this England team, and chalk that one up to unfortunately being put on the pitch just as the game was beginning to turn against him. Rest of the replacement forwards are Johnny Hill and Jack Willis to come on in that second half, and the replacement backs Ben Youngs, George Ford and Max Malin. So, this is nice. They've chopped and changed from that team we got to see last week. Those lads had their shot to try and impress of who gets to start in the World Cup, changing it all up. Ben Youngs coming on. I sort of said it last week about Danny Kerr. I think what Danny Kerr brings. I don't actually think England utilised Danny Kerr in the right way. I don't think just letting him sit there and just do box kicks all day is how he used Danny Kerr correctly. But, he's had his game now. Let Van Poortvliet have a go, and then Ben Youngs can come on in that second half along with George Ford. And, Max Maitland's coming on the wing. Not sure if he'll come on directly for Elliot Daly, or he might even come on at centre. And be shifted out to the wing, and Elliot Daly move on to a centre, is what I mean by that. You've also got a wild switch-up. You could play a half-and-half game here. There is always the opportunity to take someone like Ollie Lawrence off, move Owen Farrell to 12, and then chuck George Ford on at 10, and halfway through the game switch up and see how you want to play that 10-12 axis, or just keep Owen Farrell at 10. So a lot of utility, a lot of things for the Wales team to be considering about how England are going to play this one, but I'm expecting a big step up from the game we saw last week. On to the Wales team then, and Warren Gatland putting out a new team, a brand new team. As someone that's, a Wales supporter, it's nice to see that we've got enough depth to have just sort of two completely different starting teams. A lot of lads will have got tested last week. They had a little sprinkling of experienced players like Lee Halfpenny making his 100th cap in there, along with a lot of lads making their debut, seeing who's going to maybe fit into this World Cup squad, or thinking maybe more ahead towards the Six Nations in the next World Cup. Mixing up the team entirely and trying kind of the same thing with a couple of these lads as well, I think is a nice move just to get some experience. But you have to say, on paper, the England team's probably looking like a more consistent England team that we'll probably be seeing at the World Cup. So starting out in the front row, Gareth Thomas, Dewi Lake and Tom Francis. This is a much improved front row for me. Now, we got to see last week, of course, two lads making their debut in the props last week, so you have to imagine it'd be a more experienced side. But Dewi Lake coming back in along with his injury worries he's had in the past, coming in as captain. Jack Morgan had a superb game at captain last week, so really looking forward to see him at captain this week. Warren Gatland has said they're going to be doing different captains for every game all the way up to the World Cup, just to see how individuals get on and see how Dewi Lake leads this team on. In the lock department, Rhys Davis goes in alongside of Adam Beard. Now, David Jenkins unfortunately went off looking a little bit worse for wear at the end of that one. Lock department is one of the areas that's probably a bigger concern in Wales at the minute. They've got a lot of people retired or injured and stuff. David Jenkins going out last week. Hopefully we'll be absolutely fine when we get round to the World Cup and stuff, but didn't look particularly comfortable on it. But Adam Beard has gone up against England enough times in his past to know what to expect at the line out with some of those big names we've already seen in the English line out. In the back row, Dan Lydiate comes back, another player coming back from injuries. So many injuries in this Wales team, which has just riddled them for a good while now. But nice to see Dan Lydiate getting back into this team. Tommy Raffel at that open side flanker, and Tame Plumtree, who we got to see a bit from last week. I don't think he had enough time really to make a massive stamp down on that game. So I'm looking forward to seeing more from him specifically. Tommy Raffel's got his work cut out though. Open side flanker, real competitive shirt in this Wales team, and Jack Morgan is looking great. I'm not sure if there is maybe the option for Jack Morgan and Tommy Raffel to move to blindside flanker and actually have them both play, because I rate them both quite highly, but I have to imagine Jack Morgan's probably the more nailed on person for this. Warren Gatland has said that he actually hasn't picked his team yet. He's got 3 names nailed in at the end of that last England game. I think Tommy Raffel's got his work cut out for him on this one, though. In the halfback partnership, Thomas Williams and Owen Williams, the Williams team joining up in the halfback partnership. Now, Thomas Williams came on with Dan Biggar last week. What an impact that made! That completely changed the dynamic of the game. I think that double switch was probably one of the biggest reasons why Wales ended up winning that game. This is probably a good move, though, to test out your different scrum halves and your different fly halves working together. Give Thomas Williams and Owen Williams some time to work together, because him and Biggar have had a lot more experience working together, and then Dan Biggar and Kieran Hardy on the bench together as well to switch up. It might even be worth bringing Thomas Williams off and Hardy on earlier than bringing Dan Biggar on, because I imagine Dan Biggar's in the team. He's been captain before. I expect him to be in that World Cup team. Maybe worth bringing Hardy on to let him play alongside Owen Williams, give them a bit of time together before bringing Dan Biggar on a little bit later on. In the centre partnership, Nick Tompkins goes in on inside centre and Joe Roberts going in at outside centre. Looking forward to see some stuff from this lad. The first time I read this, it was Jay Roberts, and I was like, oh my god, they've brought Jamie Roberts out of retirement. So Joe Roberts going in now in the 13 shirt. So nice to see some new combos here. George North looked good. at outside centre last week. I thought he was impressive on the scramble defence. So I think maybe he's being a bit more nailed on for this outside centre. But good to test out some different, link-ups. They're testing out some of these lower cap lads now, giving them debuts, letting them have some experience on, top tier. Really nice to see. And then finally, in the back three, we have Tom Rogers, Josh Adams, and Liam Williams. So you've got your more experience there. Josh Adams and Liam Williams know what they're going to be doing in this game. Tom Rogers still on low caps. I think he's on 2 or 3 caps. He's still very low on terms of his caps. Came over from sevens, an exciting player that can get involved now in this wing. I would imagine wingers are more nailed on, that it's probably going to be Zammit and Josh Adams are probably going to be your starting 2. But Rio Dyer's had some hit or miss games. Rio Dyer's looking good on attack, maybe not quite as much in defence. Tom Rogers has every opportunity to, get involved, maybe be a third choice winger, maybe ahead of people like Cuthbert or Owen Lane, who are also competing for it. I'm looking forward to see what Tom Rogers brings to this game. Overall, as a team, it's a nice looking Wales team. They've mixed it up a lot. I'm looking forward to see how some of these different combinations are going to work. I think on paper, the England team's probably like a stronger team, but I said that last week. And out came Wales and played a really, really good game. In terms of the replacements quickly, then we have Sam Parry, Kemsley Matthias making his debut, and Dylan Lewis. So, we're still testing out the new props, the new front row. Who's getting into this squad? Who's going to be in the next World Cup? I think this is probably the right way around, though. I actually quite like the starting front row for Wales. I would probably say that might even be one of the teams you look at as you go towards the World Cup. Sam Parry certainly on the fringes for this Wales team. I did like Elliot D last week. I think I would probably be having Dewi Lake start and Elliot D on that bench. But Sam Parry's got a lot to prove. Can absolutely get into this team. Can he get in there? Maybe it's like a third choice, hooker for me. We'll see how he gets on. And then in the replacement forwards alongside them, Christ Shanuza and Tane Basham. Now this one was interesting, because when I think of both of these lads, I think of back rowers. I don't know who would slide in to play lock if there is an injury to lock. I'm even wondering if I've seen Chwinza do lock. He plays at Exeter, doesn't he? I'm wondering if he actually can cover lock. I just tend to think of him as playing in that back row, but maybe I absolutely can get involved in that lock department as well. And then in the replacement backs, Kieran Hardy, Dan Biggar, and Kieran Williams. So we've already mentioned about that partnership going on. Kieran Hardy's got a lot to prove, I think, actually, because the impact from Thomas Williams and Dan Biggar last week, I think, changed the game completely. Let's see if Kieran Hardy can do the same thing, and then Kieran Williams will also be coming on at some point in that second half. So in terms of a score prediction, man, what do we think for this one? This England team looks stacked. This Wales team looks, like they're shaking it up a bit. I feel like on paper, the England team is better than the Wales team. I said the same thing last week. I even predicted an England win last week, and Wales came out of the blocks in that second half and did so much better. I imagine there's a lot of pressure still on this England team to bounce back from that game last week, and a lot of these top-tier lads on high caps would definitely be looking for a win. For me, I'm going to say an England win. I'm going to say by 6. That's going to be my prediction, guys, but make sure you drop down in the comment section your thoughts on the teams along with your own score predictions. If you haven't already, make sure to get them up on the Super Brew, because there's a lot of games going on this week, including some of the Tier 2 games, which I'm going to try and find separately to watch on my own. I'm going to try my best over the weekend to do some review videos for these 2 games that I've done for France, Scotland and England, Wales. So make sure you are subscribed to know when they come out on the channel as well. I hope you've all enjoyed this one today, guys. I will see you all next time. Bye-bye.